I'm sure everyone's seen the news. I'm completely stumped by it. Managed to get Michael on. Michael, I know you were Parkinson out. What? Just going back, what was the turning point for you?
The turning point was the MK Dons game. I think it's a difficult one because I was Parky in up until the MK Dons match, and the reason I turned Parky out wasn't because of the style of football. I know a lot of people weren't happy with the style of football, and let's be honest, for Sunderland in League One, we shouldn't really be so defensive. But I had no problem with that. If we were keeping clean sheets and we were nicking games 1-0 and were consistently doing it, hey, fine by me. I didn't care how we got promoted, just that we did it. My main issue with Parkinson was that he was too reactive in games. And I've said it before. I said it again when the review we did with Ben for the Fleetwood game. I've probably bored that angle to death already, but Doncaster is a prime example of what I was talking about. The last 15-20 minutes, Doncaster were pressing Sunderland, were pushing us back, and if Parkinson had been remotely proactive, we would have got 3 points out of that game, in my opinion, and not 1. So I feel for the bloke, don't get me wrong. I think Parky did definitely want to be here, and I'm never going to hold Parkinson to see him the same way as David Moyes, because he's a dour Scottish so-so, in that he treated the place with contempt every time. Parkinson never did that. I just think he just wasn't good enough. I just think he was far too stubborn, and wouldn't make tough decisions. And I think that ultimately it's the right call. Now, I mean, I'm sure we'll get onto managerial candidates, what we want later on, but what are your thoughts on it? So obviously, I was only Parky out 2 weeks ago, but there you go.
I mean, I'm probably the biggest fan of Phil Parkinson in Sunderland. For me, it took until Friday night for me to really come round a bit, but I was never 100% Parkinson out. I was Parkinson for the longest time. Then I think it got to a point where I was on the fence, which was maybe Friday night, but maybe Doncaster. I think it was after Doncaster. I was like, nah, maybe I'm on the fence now.
Yeah.
The only reason I was still Parkinson in was financially. I don't know if we could afford to pay £300,000 to get rid of him.
Yeah.
To then have to hire someone else. I mean, we'll definitely get on to future managerial appointments. One thing I do want to ask, however, is do you ever think he could have turned it around or not?
Yeah, I think there was definite. I think there was enough there for him to turn it round. I think again, it's just his own stubbornness was what was holding him back. And I think that if you weren't going to, I mean, there's been reported. What's what I'm looking for? There's been rumours going around that apparently he was falling out with the likes of Power. I think it was Power and Ledbetter. This was on Ready to Go, by the way, so don't know how much substance there is to those posts. But there's been rumours going around that he was falling out with a few of the players. I'll tell you one Sunderland player who should be quite relieved, Aidan McGeady, because now you think, but albeit now you've got to get him until January, play every under-23s game to get as much fitness as possible. He could come back into the fold. But he could have easily turned it around. You know, I mean, look at it now. As much as dour as it looks at the moment, how many points are we off top 2? 5 points.
Top 2. I think we're 8 off top, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not bothered about top. I just want to get second. If you get second, then I think it's a successful season. You just get promoted. We could still salvage the season if we get this next appointment right. And we've got to make sure we do get it right. We won't have anyone in time for Burton. Maybe not even anyone in time for Wigan. You wouldn't think, but I mean, maybe. But certainly not long enough to have an impact on the Wigan game. But in the meantime, we've just got to focus on getting 2 wins in these next 2 games. But Parkinson could have easily turned it around. I really wanted him to, and it was a very tough decision for me to turn Parky out. But I could just see he just wasn't impacting games the way that I felt he should have been if we wanted to get promoted.
Yeah, I feel as if with Parkinson, for me, the one reason why I guess I was starting to go Parky out was I was really starting to see the light of that. He just wasn't, as you say, proactive enough when games weren't going our way and other managers would change formation, bring a player off and bring a player on, change the system, slightly change tact. We didn't. We just stuck out the same thing. And I think that worked in our favour initially with sticking with the same formation and the same 11-ish players, because we eventually got real chemistry and got a real system going and everyone knew what they were doing. But eventually when we got figured out, there was no going back from there. I just wanted to ask you if he could have ever turned it around, because like that you can go back and maybe think if in that game he had went for the backup, brought that player on to to change things up. Maybe things would have went differently. For me, one thing I think we need to mention is, one thing I want to ask you is, do you think Parkinson had every chance with this squad, and do you think this squad is big enough and flexible enough to really change the system that much? Because you look at a squad like Fleetwood, who've got so much depth and so many different players. Do we really have that depth, or are we clutching at straws with our 11 anyway?
Well, you look at it, we've got someone, again, I mentioned him earlier, like Aidan McGeady, someone who can provide a different option. The issue, obviously, I know this isn't your question, but when McGeady's played, for example, the issue is that everyone focuses on McGeady and it's not a team game so much. But Sunderland, if they were smart enough, and Parkinson didn't utilise this, you could use that to your advantage, get McGeady to occupy so many players. And I've said this before as well, it frees up space, frees up the channels, frees up the byline, it frees up all different areas on the pitch for other players to exploit. And that means that, yes, it might be a bit more predictable, but but I tell you what, to some extent, it'll confuse the opposition, because they'll be focusing so much on McGeady that everyone else goes under the radar. It's similar to what Ben said about the Fleetwood thing with Barton. Because we focus on Barton, the Fleetwood players have got the shackles taken off them, and someone could use McGeady in that similar fashion. With the squad, though, yes, I do. But where Parkinson should have tried different systems is the 2 cup games we had a few weeks ago, when we had Mansfield and we had Fleetwood in the FA Cup and the Tin Pot Trophy. In those 2 competitions, he could have used that squad and said, right, let's try different systems, different formations. Exactly. Against Mansfield, who ultimately down the line, yes, losing to Mansfield is very poor. I'm not going to defend the result because it was terrible. But for me, I wasn't that bothered about going out the FA Cup, because we were never going to win it. And I know that's probably not the right attitude. It's probably a tin pot attitude to have that. But ultimately, for this season, it was not on the list of Sunderland's priorities. Now, if Phil Parkinson had used different plays and different tactics, and say we tried something different and looked better but lost, people might have given it a bit more leniency. And certainly against Fleetwood, like in the Cup, I don't get why we didn't just try a whole different...
Just try something different, yeah.
Exactly. Try it. If you lose, so what? Even more the Fleetwood game than the Mansfield one. We were already through. And I would use... And whoever comes in next, if they're in by the Oldham game is experimentation for me. Absolute experimentation. Obviously, you look, if you can get through, great. But at the end of the day, that's not our priority. Our priority is getting promoted. And if I think Parkinson could have used different systems and different tactics. There's different things you could try. If you try it and it doesn't work, fair enough. At least you've tried it. But Parkinson never was willing to. That was his big problem.
I think that was his main downfall, is that he was never even willing to try a 4 at the back, or try playing along the floor, or try bring Embleton or Diamond or Neil in, something along those lines, and build the team around them. Speaking of going forward, I know you're a huge fan of Paul Cook. I've just heard from inside sources there that John O'Shea, I mean, it's a rumour, but apparently John O'Shea has been asked to come in for an interview. Obviously, we've mentioned Paul Cook, there's the Cowley brothers. If you had to rank your top 3 candidates to come in order, who would it be? Out of anyone.
Right. Shall I have a deluded answer or a realistic answer? Yeah, let's go realistic. Right, okay. I was going to say deluded answer, Rafa Benitez, Sam Allardyce. Obviously, yeah, right. Getting back to reality, Paul Cook's my number 1 choice. I think that I've said constantly, I know you disagree with me heavily on Will Grigg, but I still believe if Will Grigg's managed properly, that was another reason I wanted Parkinson gone, actually. His management of Grigg at the start of the season was terrible.
Management, yeah.
Yeah. I think Paul Cook could get the best out of Grigg. And I know we haven't got the quickest side, but that doesn't mean we don't have any creativity in the team. We've scored in all but 1 game, I think, this season.
Yeah, Charlton,
in the league. So we are clearly capable of scoring goals. He would be number 1. Oh, now this is where I'm struggling to think here.
Cowley brothers, Phillips, Pearson.
Pearson I probably would take. I would take Pearson for 6 months. Because I think... I think Pearson needs to. I think Pearson would be a short-term appointment for me if he did come in. Yeah, I'm going to throw another name in the hat. Lee Johnston, who left Bristol City in the summer.
Yeah.
I think that's and by the way, I don't think those 2 names are unrealistic. I think they're the type of people we should be going in for. If we were lower down mid-table and had no chance of going up, I can maybe understand why they're unrealistic. But while we have half a chance of going up in the top 2, these managers should be attracted to the club. And the third one, and maybe this is probably going to be a surprise, given that what I've said about Kevin Phillips, is Kevin Ball. I think Kevin Ball.
He's got experience, though.
Sorry.
Kevin Ball's got managerial experience.
Yeah, I think it's more that he's got coaching experience with the first team, and I think he must be a respected figure around the club. Now, I'm not saying players wouldn't respect Kevin Phillips, but for me, if you had Kevin Phillips and Kevin Ball as a duo, maybe I probably wouldn't be against that. But I just think Kevin Phillips is a very romantic suggestion, whereas Kevin Ball has already got coaching credentials within the club. Now, I know it's the first team, he's managed 2 games here and there, but ultimately it's more than what Phillips has got. And I think Ball would emphasise the ethos of Sunderland. I would emphasise Ball, by the way, can you imagine?
He loves his football club.
Can you imagine Kevin Ball's halftime team talks if the team's not performing? I would love to be in the room there.
Have you seen that one where have you seen the one where he's got the little plaster on his nose and he's speaking
Is this on Sunderland Till I Die, the first season? It's like it's a little clip of it. Yeah, well, exactly. That's the sort of attitude we need to have. Now, I'm not saying Parkinson. Well, Parkinson didn't strike me as someone who could do that. Whoever Sunderland have got to approach next has got to be a proactive manager and one that will spot what's going on in a game and is willing to affect it. And not just the first 2-3 games where you see managers making subs with half an hour to go. I want them to start that and then maintain that. Keep that up. If they're willing to change things and willing to give a bit more of a gamble, and if it doesn't pay off, then fair enough. You know, that they'll take the flak for it. But ultimately, like I said, the aim's got to be go up. Whether people said we couldn't afford to get rid of Parky, we also can't afford to be in this league next season.
Yeah. And on that note, we'll leave it there. Michael, thank you for coming on.
No worries.
Enjoy your tea.
Yeah, I will do. Thanks very much.
Now we'll go now.